Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to The Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
The future is over. It's such a shame. The only thing you can do with your mind is something you could just do with your hand.
They said, "We'll come back for you, Paw-Paw." Paw-Paw. That's what they called me. And they called each other Sophie and Jason.
Hi, we're here for an adoption.
We can't release him until this comes off. He has about a month to go.
The woman that was here before said that he only had 6 months left.
If he bonds with you, he could easily hang on 5 years.
We'll be 40 in 5 years.
40 is basically 50, and then...
That's it for us.
God, I always thought I'd be smarter.
Andy, we're still in the middle of our 10-year anniversary celebratorium.
Some might call it the beginning. Some might say that we're only in the middle of the beginning, Pete.
We're in the middle of the beginning of this gigantic series that we're doing. Easily 30 movies, all that were released in 2011. the year of our Lord 2011. And last week, we did a movie I don't want to watch again. This week, I guess we're rolling the dice with the future.
Where are we going to land with the future?
I don't know. I can't wait to see what happens about this. Now, how did we end up with the future on this list?
I mean, I had seen Miranda July's film, Me and You and Everyone We Know, and loved it. I saw that in the theaters, and she's a filmmaker who I just feel is doing like really quirky things, and I really kind of like that about her. But somehow I've missed all of, well, her two other films, The Future and then Kajillionaire, which just came out. And so I really find her an intriguing person, brings a lot of quirky stuff to the screen and to her stories. This was one of those when I saw that this was a 2011 film, I'm like, oh, that will be a really interesting one to include because she has an interesting and unique voice.
She sure does. And she has a fascinating way of capturing that voice in other characters on screen at the same time. This feels to me, and I haven't seen the other Miranda July films, but it feels to me like an opinionated, stylistic filmmaker that I would expect if I watched another Miranda July film, I would have a similar feeling in my bones while watching it.
Yeah, for sure.
This is, as you know, my favorite part of the show. What does Andy think Pete will think of this movie?
I think you loved it. I think that you retroactively decided I need to name both of my kids The Future because of your passion for this film. And so now you have two children, both named The Future. Now, is it going to take? I don't know. That's kind of something you'll have to work out with them. But that's and I think that you also renamed your cat Paw-Paw and removed one of its front paws. I think you really went far.
Okay.
Your passion for this film.
I feel like I can't even talk about what I think you think of this movie because you already wrote it in your damned Letterboxd review. You spoiled the entire thing.
I don't hide things, Pete.
Ugh, bugs me.
Miranda July and I feel like, she's on my best friends who haven't met me yet list or whatever you call it. Like she's
100%.
Yeah. I'm right there with her. Like we're in sync.
Yeah.
This movie was rated R upon its release for some sexual content.
Not very much.
I only said some. There's dirty limericks.
That's right.
There's a butt.
For dirty limericks, please let the MPAA start rating against dirty limericks.
Yeah. There's some sex and butts and dirty poems.
Sex and butts and dirty poems.
So then that leaves us with the big questions, Pete.
Yeah. To the big question. What are the big questions, Andy? The biggest question is, did you, like me, spend the weekend speaking in the voice of Paw-Paw?
I should have. I feel like I should have.
I feel like that would be on brand for you.
It would. It would be on brand for me. I think it would be more on brand for me if any of my family watched this with me. Then I could have that conversation and they would say, oh, Dad's talking like that damn cat again.
Yeah.
But otherwise, it's just, Dad's just being weird again. I feel like I get enough of that.
But that's like Monday.
That's like every day.
Like any really. Given Monday is that. I feel like the question for me is, how did I feel about the movie? I have to say this is a movie that was a real slow burn for me. I did not, as I was watching it, I felt like I absolutely adore the tone of this movie. I adore the language. I love the way they're talking to one another. It's got this sort of absurdist dialogue that just, it felt like anything any character says in this movie is going to be received with a firm yes and. This was like an improv school film to me, that everybody was just an enthusiastic dialogue partner, and it doesn't matter what they're possibly talking about, but it's going to be received wonderfully. And it starts from the very opening frame when they're having their conversation about stopping time, and they both freeze for the opening credit run, and I thought that was just delightful. And then I started to struggle about halfway through the movie with what the movie is trying to say, because everything I wanted to happen between these people and everything I expected to happen between these people and their presumptively adopted cat started coming apart at the wheels. I suddenly did not like it so much. I liked the way it made me feel and I liked the texture of it, but I stopped liking the people. And by the end, I was just confused. I was just confused about my feelings, not about what happened. Like, it was just my feelings where I felt a little bit burned. And so I can confidently say I really enjoyed this movie because of what it is and the way it speaks. And they killed the cat. They literally killed the cat. They had the opportunity to save a literal cat, and they killed the cat.
I think it's hard to say they killed it.
They killed it.
They
absolutely killed it. Inaction is a choice.
Well, they're inaction, but really it was time was frozen. It was time was there. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing.
Andy, frozen time is not an excuse.
Oh,
you know what? That, I don't care what you say. That's going on the shirt. It's going to be a picture of a cat with a broken hand, and the frozen time is no excuse.
I love it. I love it. We'll send it to Miranda.
So,
and
I don't know. What do you
every day?
What?
I'm sure she'll bundle herself up into it.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny that you bring up some of these things because Miranda actually started this as a performance piece at the Kitchen back in 2007, and workshopped it, I guess you could almost say, and developed it from there, which I think is really interesting. Because there are elements about it that feel very, like you talked about improv in the way, like yes and the way that it kind of formed and shifted and reshaped and never went, like I never knew where the film was going. And for me, that just was exciting. I love things like that.
100%. Yes.
It made it, I was always engrossed in like, what on earth is going to happen next with this crazy story? And because of that, I did really enjoy it. And no, the story did not go where I wanted it to with their relationship, but and certainly for the poor cat. But at the same time, I really enjoyed it.
For real. Oh, God, Andy. It was horrible.
I know.
Horrible.
It was very sad. It was very, very sad. I also have to just say, I just recently watched Midnight Mass, the newest project that Mike Flanagan put out on Netflix. And I really, Hamish Linklater was the preacher who comes to this small island town.
Right.
And he was mesmerizing. That film, or that miniseries, just absolutely mesmerizing. And he's one of those actors that I had probably seen in a lot of other things, like The Big Short, Fantastic Four, just things that he pops up in, but not somebody that I ever paid that much attention to. But now I'm like, I need to see more of this person because he's just fascinating to watch on screen. I just loved him in this film. And I thought he and Miranda both carried the right quirky weight and presence throughout the film that just made it like I found it very easy to buy into these characters.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, a huge shout out to Hamish Linklater. I think he was fantastic. And, there are some other things that I have a little bit more resonant kind of memory of him in, like Fargo and Newsroom, and he's been around for quite some time, doing a lot of TV. He was in Pushing Daisies, which was really, really great. He just did one episode, but I've been thinking a lot about it because of Lee Pace, who is now playing Day in the Foundation series adaptation, which is, anytime I get a chance to bring up Pushing Daisies, I have to do it. It's such a terrific show. So I thought he was really great, and talk about a wonderful partner for her. Like they were the most believable couple. They just so awkward and funny together, and the way their relationship started to unravel, I thought was really kind of beautiful and tragic, and that they were both dealing with a real sort of personal crisis, and their individual crises could not line up together, and that was the dissolution of their relationship for me, and I thought it was really special, the way that happened.
Well, and what I loved about it is how that ended up getting portrayed in the film. And I know we're kind of jumping all over the place, but how he kind of had this power that he talked about where he could freeze time and kind of gets, he's basically stuck in this place where it's like, I don't know, I found it so fascinating, this exploration of the viewpoint of life from these perspectives, where for him, it was like he was stuck. Everything was the same because time was frozen, quote unquote.
Right.
But it really was. But it's like that. Like nothing's going to change because time is frozen. Whereas for her, it's like she was just like in her head, like living her entire life before it even had happened. And everything was like, so far gone that she's already kind of like given up because she's like already pictured, well, this is where things are going to be. So why go on? And I found that and we get that right from the conversation when they're talking about adopting the cat and they're like, oh, geez, this cat could live for 5 years. Well, 5 years, that's, we're going to be in our 40s and 40s, the new 50, and life's practically over. And like that, like a cynical view of like, that's the end. That's it. It's interesting to see how people can like lock into something like that. And this is where I am and I'm never going to change. And that's it. And that's what I found so fascinating about both of their stories and their individual journeys, how they kind of conflicted. And then also just like the people that they ended up meeting along the way, with her having this affair with Marshall and the daughter Gabby that's along with her. And then also how Jason ends up connecting with this old guy, Joe, who sells him a hairdryer. And then he always is over at Joe's house, like hanging out. Like, I don't know. I just found it so fascinating the way that they latched onto these different people and different views.
Yeah. And what did each of those people, like each of their relationships with those people was filling a space for them that they weren't getting with one another. Right.
Yeah.
And that was the piece I thought was so interesting, that she, like the manifestation of her sort of unlived life was filling a hole in another woman's family, right? That was because the other woman had died. So she was the insert mom here character, right? And she needed that kind of the sort of warm embrace of the family, and coming into this was like the easiest route to fulfill that fantasy was coming into this existing family with the dad who was he has a little bit of a pervy streak, talking about like wanting to watch her, eat and stuff, but really on the down low.
Oh, and he's got the chain and you're reading that message, right? With the chain and everything. It's like,
yeah, right. Right. It just there was some weird stuff going on there, but I thought genuinely, like, what is it that she's getting out of that manifestation of her future that she's not getting out of Jason? And as I'm watching her interact with him, I think, well, of course I know when she's like, she's got to go back to Jason. He was quirky and awesome and fantastic. And then after spending time with her at Marshall's house, she goes back to the house. And you realize that it's terrible. It's terrible. Of course, you could see exactly what she gets out of being with Marshall, because where she was living with Jason was a disaster. Like, it was dirty and gross, and it was filmed with this absence of color, and it was all of that. And for him, how do you like fill in like the hole that he filled in with this guy? I think the argument can be made that it wasn't about a relationship at all, right? It was about just sort of, well, that's not entirely true, because I feel like he did have a relationship with the old guy, but it wasn't about filling a place that sort of completes him with an interpersonal relationship the way it was for her. And so I've been trying to parse, what is it about each of them that needed this other thing that they weren't able to satisfy with one another?
And you didn't mention in the story thread with her, living this life with Marshall, there's also this strange element of the daughter and digging the hole in the backyard to bury her in the backyard.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are they saying with that? This idea that, we're going to bury this kid in the backyard up to her neck in the dirt to spend the night out there, and only to have her come in the middle of the night, and Sophie is the one who is there for her, gives her the bath and all that. I'm like, that's a strange thing. Like, are we burying, kind of the memories of that past life? Like, I wasn't sure where we were going with that, but there's something along that line. And then as for him, another interesting element is that he starts seeing all the same things at Joe's house that are at his house, like the same couch, the same MC Escher relativity, poster that's hanging
right.
up, the same little hippo statues, and I feel like she starts seeing the same things too, and it's like this merging of their worlds. But it also started, I started feeling like Jason was hanging out with Joe because he saw his own future there, and he almost started seeing like he was Joe, like this is his future, and he just wants to jump to his future to have this past already done and not have to deal with the day in and day out. And that's kind of where that was my read on what was going on with him.
Well, and that was the same thing for her, I guess, in the same language, right? She just wanted to skip to the part where where the relationship was settled and there was a future that existed that had all of these roles filled for her. And I think that was just a fascinating way to look at it. And by both counts, they skipped the cat.
Yeah. Right.
Right. Like they skipped the relationship with the cat, this 5-year relationship with the cat. And as a result, they missed their pickup and the cat was euthanized.
Yeah. So sad.
Ugh.
Which, I mean, according to like the frozen time theory that he had frozen time by and was talking to the moon, time continued. It's just he was stuck in this moment of this breakup, this impending breakup, and was too afraid to deal with the breakup. And so almost preferred, even though I don't think it was completely intentional, but almost preferred to just stop time, not have to deal with it, and just skip to the post breakup in the hopes that he could find a way to, get things back to where they were, but skip the hurt and skip the pain and everything. And in the process, they end up unfreezing time the day that the cat is getting euthanized, and he just doesn't get there in time because he has to help the moon restart time and everything down at the beach. Just, you say all this, it just sounds so absurd, but
I know. I feel like the moon really hosed him in this. Like the moon was unclear about its own role and agency in their relationship, and I think as a result, the cat died because the moon was a jerk.
Always blame the moon when you can.
Always blame the moon.
Yeah.
It was a fascinating sort of exploration in that relationship. Did the mechanic of him being able to stop time throw you at all? Or was that something that you thought, because they tease it in the opening credits, we've talked about that. And then when it comes back to him putting his hand on her head and as she's about to come clean with him and he is able to stop time, that's where the movie changes, because it takes this fantasy element and makes it, for all intents and purposes in the narrative of the movie, real.
Is he really stopping time?
Well, no, I don't think he is.
I don't think so. See, this is where it becomes like a metaphorical sort of journey for the two of them. Like, in the beginning, we know he's faux stopping time. They both play along with it, and it's very adorable, especially when he's like, terrible at this.
Yes, that was so adorable.
That was great. But then when he stops time later, it's because like he just wants to live in the moment and not have to deal with grown-up things.
Well, because here's the thing, she did have the affair, right? She did sleep with him. That's not a made-up thing.
Well, but I think it was only the one time, and I think like the entire fantasy of living with Marshall and all of that,
was
like
happening,
I think that's in her head
while his hand was on her head.
Yeah, or at some point, I don't know, because obviously they go through the whole breakup. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure time-wise how it all worked, but definitely she had the one affair. She went over to Marshall's house, and then she has this fantasy about her whole life now living with this guy, settled in with his daughter, and she's just there to be there for him. and realizes like what she really wants is to, have her old life back and actually go through the challenges of dealing with a relationship.
That's where my relationship with the movie starts to maybe break a little bit.
With the metaphorical switch up?
Yeah, but and I love me some metaphor in the movie.
But only in horror, apparently.
Well, that's really my sweet spot. I don't know if you've heard this. I love horror movies now. So what happens when he puts his hand on her head and they both have these relationships, I feel like the movie itself doesn't recognize whether it is moved into science fiction fantasy or if it is just strictly in metaphor. And it's not like I'm asking the movie to be clear. I'm just questioning, does it really work? And because that's the point in the movie that I stopped to think about all this stuff, that makes me think that for me, maybe it just didn't work as well. Like it didn't work 5-star and a heart well for me.
Well, yeah, and I think I'm there with you. Like I don't think it's a complete success the way that it happens, but I guess the reason that I still find myself enjoying it so much is because I hadn't really seen it play out this way before, and I felt like even if it wasn't quite, 5-star and a heart perfect handling of that whole thing, what July was doing here was it was such a fascinating way to kind of create this exploration about trying to figure your life out. And so I end up maybe forgiving it a little more just because I find the journey so fascinating.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the, her experience and the things that she won't let go of, Shirty McShirt, whatever it is that she's carrying around the shirt all the time, and the shirt becomes such a principal avatar for her own journey. I think is really interesting, because it just is a constant reminder that this is the reason you don't judge people, because you have no idea what they're going through in their lives. You have no idea who's walking around, with a shirt in their back pocket that they haven't been able to let go of, since their youth. There are all sorts of great sort of avatars in this movie about like growing up and, maturing into new relationships and figuring out what the future holds for you. So that stuff I do like. So if we go from the movies just sort of dabbling with sci-fi fantasy in metaphor, then we have to talk about the cat. We have to talk about the cat.
Paw-Paw.
Paw-Paw. So the deal with the cat had been injured. They found the cat. They took it to service, and the service says, okay, we got to heal the cat. We're going to heal the cat. You can adopt the cat, but you can't take the cat home yet because the cat has to heal. But you have one day. There's going to be a day where you come and you get the cat and you can take the cat home. If you're late a day, we're going to kill the cat because we euthanize. That's the setup for the cat, which is fine. And then the cat starts talking, right? In the movie. It is voiceover.
Well, you make it sound like it happened late in the movie. That was like the first thing we hear is the cat.
It's the first line. Yeah. No, it's the first line. So I guess maybe that becomes my issue with the cat. What ultimately is the purpose of the cat? The cat is also voiced by Miranda July, her character in crazy voice. So that's Paw-Paw. What do you think of Paw-Paw's role in moving the narrative of their journey together and their journey in figuring out what the meaning is of their lives forward?
My sense of it was that the cat was not so much like figuring out their lives, but was almost a metaphor for just life in general and just the exploration about the darkness and the light and these different periods that people go through over the courses of their lives. And the idea that there's something out there that you're meant to love. And, but, you're not always going to make it in time for the thing that you love. But there's not necessarily death after you die. It's like this perpetual journey. And so for me, the cat became just like this, because we see the cat, they come to the vet the one time and they actually spend a few minutes with Paw-Paw, and we see the paws quite often as we're having these little narration moments of the cat as it's like kneading on the liner pads or playing with a ball or whatever it's doing. It's just the little paws that we get. And that's very cute. And I kept feeling like it's the metaphor that they have for this whole thing of life that's out there, and this idea of caring for something, of loving something, of this connection that you can't, like, once you have it, you have this commitment and everything. And so that it became for me that metaphor.
Okay. I couldn't help think, especially as we got to the end when the cat says, "And then I died for real," if the cat was in a different movie than our principal characters. That maybe the cat was actually referring to a movie that we weren't watching at the time. Like it was a commercial or a cut in. And so I feel like I have to ask, would the movie still work if we didn't have cat narrative throughout?
I feel like that's part of the journey. Like we've got kind of Sophie's view of how she thinks her future might go. We've got Jason's view of his future. We've got kind of this sense from Paw-Paw of, what life can be.
And the ticking clock. I mean, don't forget, like Paw-Paw is the ticking clock in this movie.
Sure. And then we also have the moon, which is this, rock in the sky that's just kind of floating there that also might have some sage wisdom. It's like these different perspectives that are kind of coming at them. And it's, I feel like it's not the same movie if we don't have any of these elements.
Yeah, putting that, sort of pitting the moon against the cat, those are the sort of two oppositional forces of nature. Like there's the ticking clock of the cat, that this cat is now part of a human system that is both healing it and expending resources to heal the cat and then will kill the cat. And the moon is just this like unstoppable force of nature that we sort of bow to its whimsy, and we exist somewhere between those two forces. Yeah. And everything that happens in between is just kind of a crapshoot. And you can sort of see that when you place Miranda's character up against the dance studio, the receptionist at the dance studio, who's constantly getting more likes on her video, or is able of actually creating dance videos in her living room, where 30 days 30 dances is just not happening for Miranda. So I mean that's an interesting thing. There's just I think the weight of my experience with the movie is heavy at that halfway point. Like a lot of things start coming together and coming apart and coming back together all at once in the latter half of the movie. And I start to think about the threads that I have been sort of weaving together in my mind for the first half of the movie. And I really enjoy the first half of the movie. And it's harder for me to keep track of the things that I loved about the first half of the movie and the second half of the movie. It's just a lot of sort of narrative kind of chaos.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of that. It really kind of pushes into a whole new realm as they both go on these separate journeys, kind of figuring out life. And I mean, you talked about her when she's comparing herself to the other receptionist at the dance studio. Mm-hmm. But then we also have when Sophie needs a job again, and she takes the job as the receptionist, and her friends come in. And we see, her friends are pregnant. This is Tammy and Sasha. And then all of a sudden the intercutting back and forth is the time lapse between kind of as these friends grow up, right?
Yes. As they grow up over like 25 years.
Yeah, or beyond. We cut to Sophie and then we cut back and now they have their kids. We cut to Sophie, cut back, and now their kids are bigger. We keep doing that. Next thing we know, it's their grown-up kids who are married and their moms are already dead. And what has Sophie done with her life? Nothing. She has spent her life working as a receptionist and has gotten nowhere with her life. And she's in this relationship with this man that she had an affair with and is gone nowhere there. And she's kind of left with nothing. And it's a fascinating way to kind of explore that as this dark view of what your future could have for you in store.
Yeah. No, I get it.
Yeah, and so for me, I really, I mean, I love the characters. I love kind of this joy that we have with these two characters over the course of the beginning, but I also really like how the film does go dark as they kind of split because of this affair that she's had. They're both kind of lost. He's just, he has no, like they quit their jobs. And I mean, it wasn't even a great job, but at least he was working from home, I guess. He was a call tech service person for a phone company. And then he gets this job working as a door-to-door tree salesman. And he tries to quit and can't. Like, that's how inept he is.
That was the funniest bit, though. You've got to.
Oh, it's great.
The fact that he joins on a complete whim because he's just decided, I'm going to quit my job and follow my bliss, kind of a thing. And then he realizes he's the only one who's agreed to do this. And you could go all the way to the coast and hit every single thing. You are our face of the future of nature and trees. I thought that was a brilliant, brilliant bit. As guys who have kind of made it through that part of our lives, you and me, older guys, that part, I remember that part. I remember thinking those things. I remember being in that place in my life, and I am relieved not to be there anymore.
I mean, it puts you in this place when you're working jobs like that, where you're like, God, is there more than this? And I think a lot of people think that, and also it's like that guilt factor, like he can't quit, like, He is the epitome of a character who does things because he feels guilted into it, even though no one is guilting him into it. He buys this picture of this cat, and this is how the whole story with Marshall evolves, because he kind of is guilted into it by the little girl Gabby, even though he's not, but he feels guilted into it, and so he buys this picture. Same thing with not quitting the job or, just hanging out with Joe. Like, there are things that he's doing in his life because he's just like, he can't make decisions for himself, and he kind of lets everyone else drive everything for him. And I think that speaks to this person who can't even go through this breakup because he just would rather freeze time and pretend it doesn't happen than actually go through it.
Right. So there was their relationship. So the old guy, his relationship. Did you see a bit of your future in him handing off the hairdryer, rewiring the hairdryer? Was that a part of you?
Sounds like it's going to be more part of you with your passion for side projects.
Love.
Yeah, you're going to
have a love of lathes.
Fun side projects in your career. Well, what I loved about him, and this is why I think Jason gravitated to Joe, is because Joe has a happy life with his wife of 68 years or something like that. 62 years, but they've been married for 60 or something like that. I can't remember. And then he's writing like these pervy limericks about his wife, which
that was amazing,
really awkward. But also, it's like Joe's already done it; he's through it, And meanwhile, Jason is just like, I don't know how to figure this stuff out. I'd rather just be where you are. And so, to that end, I'm just going to keep coming over and hanging out with you. And that's really where his life is, because he's just like, I just don't know how to figure it out. So I'd rather hang out with you who's already figured it out and pretend that I'm you. And so I don't have to get through all of that.
Yeah. And there's something so comforting about that. Right. And I guess that's the same thing for her. I think the movie, not talking about it, it does offer these really satisfying parallels, because that's the same thing she did. She got through the hard stuff of, being pregnant, having a baby, going through the earliest days of parenthood and figuring out how to support one another and buy a house and all of those things. Like, she got to shortcut all of that. And there's a lot of comfort in the immediacy of taking advantage of a shortcut. And, the fact that Jason was able to do that much, much faster or much further. Like, he projected himself beyond, by 60 years,
Yeah.
Whereas it looked like she only projected herself beyond by like maybe 15. Is maybe notable. Like, the parts of life that both of them were looking forward to were just very, very different.
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting. Oh.
It is. Very.
Okay.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of interesting things to think about and talk about with this movie. And that's what I really enjoy, is that it's quirky, but I felt like July was exploring some really interesting topics in the context of the film. Did it always work? Not necessarily, but I just found it so fascinating the way that she constructed it and took us on this journey that, I end up forgiving her for any of those issues I may have, because I did enjoy it so much.
Okay. What did you think of the look of the film?
I mean, it was nice. I felt like for a kind of, I mean, this definitely fits in the indie filmmaking kind of world. And I think largely July has been operating in that world. I really think that she still captured a creative look. I mean, she's doing a very creative, fantastical story. This talking cat, and we're watching its paws. Like, those were really cute. Their apartment had a very specific look to it that just, I mean, there were times it felt very kind of comfortable and lived in. But then when she comes back, as you said, it just felt like kind of horrifying, like gray, abysmal, gross. Whereas like Marshall, his house feels like, it's a house that's well taken care of. It feels like the ideal suburban house that you'd want to just live in Tarzana, right? It just feels ideal. And Joe feels like, his house is just kind of like this kind of cluttered old person's house. And so there was a nice feel to it all. And I think that July found a way to work with her production team to capture both kind of interesting camera, not necessarily camera work, but certainly positioning and framing of things. I really liked the way that they kind of structured the shots. That's Nikolai von Gravenitz, the cinematographer, paired with the Andrew Bird's editing. It's not that Andrew Bird, it's a different Andrew Bird. Mm-hmm. At first I was like, Andrew Bird's also an editor? What? When I saw that. But also Elliot Hostetter's production design. Like, all of it just kind of, for me, it worked in context of creating this world quite well. And John Bryan's music, too.
I think so, too. I think that, just to call out that point again, the way the film does, really expertly executes contrasts. That when you take us away from the apartment, when we come back to the apartment, it feels worse than we left it, even though I don't think much changed, right? Maybe there are some more clothes strewn about, more or less, but nothing much changes. When we meet them in the apartment, to use your words, it feels lived in, which is comfortable. When we come back to the apartment after their experiences apart, it feels like it is in a state of just sort of disarray, right? It's just falling apart. And I think that is one of the really neat experiences of this movie, that it allows us to see those contrasts so clearly in location and kind of the spirit of the places that the people inhabit.
Right, exactly.
And to John Bryan's music, I don't think I know anything else off the top of my head from John Bryan. And so when I went and looked and saw that he was behind Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, that we've talked about John Bryan, that he did Step Brothers and the other guys, that he's got 40 credits and a lot of movies that I've heard of. Lady Bird,
Thomas Anderson
fantastic.
Stuff,
all of Paul Thomas Anderson's. And I would have never really put John Bryan in my catalog internally as a name I need to watch. Felt really sad to me. I need to listen to more John Bryan scores and say to myself, John Bryan wrote this, John Bryan wrote this, John Bryan wrote this every time, because I really enjoy the music in this movie, and I enjoy his catalog. I could say that.
Paranorman, did you mention?
Paranorman? I didn't mention Paranorman, but you're absolutely right. Like, we've talked about John Bryan a number of times, and I have blacked it out.
Yeah, it's great. And to that end, also, they use a fantastic Peggy Lee, Benny Goodman version of Where or When, and as the signal, which I really loved, that whole idea of like, what's going to be the signal if I like get in an accident and lose my memory, and it's that song, and they play that song a couple times, and like, I found it so effective, not just as the signal, like, but also just in context of what they're doing with the story. Like, I can't remember where or when, like that whole line. It fits everything that's kind of going on in this. And like this idea of having a life together where you don't necessarily, like, there are hard times, there are good times, there are happy, sad times. And, but it all just kind of blends into this melange of memories. And I find that, I don't know, very compelling as I listen to that song in this film.
Man, I think I've almost seen all of John Bryan's scores.
You're still on John Bryan. That's hilarious.
Even Synecdoche, New York, man.
Yeah. Oh.
So you know what? This is that is interesting because, like, as I am, as the name comes into my mind of Charlie Kaufman, I think I could have been convinced that Charlie Kaufman did The Future. This feels Kaufman-esque.
Yeah, it definitely does. Very much.
Fascinating.
Anything else? So you haven't seen anything else Miranda July has done?
No, but she's been on my list for a while. Like, I feel like maybe maybe a while is only since we put together this list of movies for this season. That I felt like she's one of those filmmakers that I could really catch up on very quickly. We could just lock that down, watch 2 other movies, and be done.
It certainly seemed like with Kajillionaire last year that there was a lot of talk about her again with just kind of her style and everything, because she does make these really cute, quirky films. But for some reason, my head told me that she's made a lot more. And so when I look at her filmography, I'm like, oh, she's only actually directed 3 films. That actually kind of surprised me. I'm like, I guess in my head, I thought that she had actually done more. So, she's done a lot of short films in that time span also. So maybe she's just kind of keeping busy doing that and performing on stage and stuff. But I definitely now, I have to go see Kajillionaire because I just really enjoy this world. And I need to rewatch Me and You and Everyone We Know. That is one of the, that's her first film. And it's one of the early films where I totally just started wanting to just see more and more John Hawkes because he's such a great character.
Oh, I remember your turn around John Hawkes.
Yeah, you
became a fan.
It was like
straight up.
Identity and the Alien miniseries that Steven Spielberg produced that he did all those at the same time or right in that same period of time. So yeah. Good stuff.
Good stuff.
So we'll be right back. But first, our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Brother Joseph, Oriel Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. How to do an award season, Andy?
It wasn't a big award movie, just one of those quirky indie movies that kind of gets noticed, but never quite breaks out. It had 1 win with 7 other nominations. The win it had was at the Yoga Awards. I don't even know what those are, but it received the award for Ghost Graduation Directors Award. It was a special award given to Miranda July. I don't know what any of that means. It just all sounds made up.
Yeah.
The Yoga Awards. Oh, there you go. Okay. The Yoga Awards are ironic awards for the worst in Spanish and foreign cinema awarded annually since 1990 by Catacric, a group of Catalan film critics. The very name of the award is a parody of that, of the Goya Awards.
So this one was mean.
This was a mean award. Yes, the Yoga Awards. So it's the Spanish equivalent of the Razzies.
The Razzies.
Yeah. So if I go to 2011, I don't know. They give out foreign cinema, Spanish cinema, and some special awards. So in the directors category, they gave 3 films the Ghost Promotion Award. I don't even know what that means, but it was for the film Verbo, for the film The Double Steps, and for this film, The Future.
Okay.
But these are their other ones, like the Worst Actor and Worst Actress Awards. They call it the What You Want Is for the Tiger to Eat Me Award.
Okay, that's awesome. In comparison, the Worst Director Razzie went to Dennis Dugan for Jack and Jill and Just Go With It that year.
Okay.
Also nominated Michael Bay, Tom Brady, Bill Condon, and Gary Marshall.
This is funny for the foreign cinema worst actor. They called it the In Search of the Lost Aura, and they gave it to Harrison Ford for Cowboys and Aliens, Morning Glory, Extraordinary Measures, and Forbidden Territory.
Oh my God. What a year.
Yeah. And the worst actress they gave to Hilary Swank, and they called it the What's the Use of an Oscar or Two? They gave it to her for New Year's Eve, The Perfect Victim, and Betty Ann Waters. Oh my gosh,
yeah.
This is so funny. So
New Year's
funny.
Eve.
Yeah.
Rough one.
Worst movie, The Tree of Life. We have a plaster. I don't even know what that means, but
Well, I'll take the Tree of Life.
yeah. So anyway, that's the Yoga Awards. So not a good one. Not a good win. And then the Alliance of Women Film Journalists, they gave this the Movies You Want to Love But Just Couldn't EDA Special Mention Award, but it lost to Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
So curious where you're going to come out with this movie. I'm really curious. How did it do at the box office? Did it make any money?
Well, July's film was budgeted, like I said earlier, at an even $1 million, kind of that indie budget line, which is $1.14 million in today's dollars. The movie released July 29th, 2011 on one screen opposite The Smurfs, Cowboys and Aliens, Crazy Stupid Love, and the limited release of Attack the Block. This never played on more than 31 screens here in the US, but it did well for the small indie that it was, earning $569,000 domestically, not breaking even with its budget, but with the international numbers of $670,000, it did for a total of $1.4 million in today's dollars. Landed the film with a modest success adjusted profit per finished minute of just under $3,000.
Okay. It's an indie movie that made money.
It's an indie movie that made money.
All right.
Tiny bit of money.
I am so curious where you're going to land on this movie. I don't even know what our conversation has done for my own opinion of this movie. I just don't know.
Let's just stop time and we'll come back and the answers will have already been given. How's that? No? Okay.
I was stopping time. I stopped time.
I'm the one.
I just want you. Yeah, no, you're terrible at this.
I don't do well.
No, it's too late. You already ruined the joke.
It's like those commercials where they freeze, but then they're really not frozen. That's what it is.
Exactly.
Yeah. We'll be right back with our ratings, but first, here is the trailer for next week's movie, Hard Labor.
Olha só esse pé direito, que maravilha, Helena. Isso aqui é achado.
Como é que fazem isso com você? O sujeito trabalha lá 10 anos, depois é cuspido, que nem um sei lá.
Que botaram o Flavinho no meu lugar.
O Flavinho. E ele é maior de idade. O lugar tá mobiliado com tudo, Otávio. Prateleira, freezer.
Eu acho meio loucura a gente se comprometer com uma coisa dessa agora, Helena.
Eu vou fazer isso dar certo. Deixa eu tentar.
All right, Andy, here we go. We gotta put some stars and bars to it. Stars and bars.
Stars and bars. This is a
that's
military
not what that thing means. That's not what that means. It's okay. Don't worry about it. What are you gonna do for your rating of this movie? Does it exceed the 3-star competency scale?
Oh yeah, I'm going to give this 4 stars and a heart. 4
stars.
That's where I am.
A heart.
Yeah. I connected with the quirky vibe that July had here. I mean, I really enjoyed it, and I found it to be kind of a special telling of this particular story.
I can see that. I think I'm there, but not quite there. I think after our conversation too, that second half of the things that frustrated me about the second half of the movie haven't been minimized in your noble efforts to convince me otherwise. And so I think I'm going to stick to 3.5, but I will give it a heart. I just really love the way these people talk. I think Miranda July is a wonderful writer, and she had a lot to say in this movie. And I think all those ideas, that it just made the film heavier than I think it could have been. So 3.5 stars and a heart. I'm feeling good about that.
Excellent. So what did you think about the future? We want to know. Hop into our Show Talk channel over in Discord, where we are going to be talking this week about this very movie.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd giveth, Andrew.
As Letterboxd always doeth.
So there are a lot of people who really hate this movie.
There are a lot of people who really hate this movie, and there are a lot of people who love this movie and might even love this movie more just to piss off the people who hate this movie.
100% agree with that assessment. Yes, that is right on the money. I tend to be with the lovers, but I did find a review that was right down the middle of the road. And it's a 3-star, so they like it a little bit less than I do, but it is still a competent film. It still hits that 6-star IMDb rule. So if you don't mind, I would like to share Jaybird.
Take it away.
A couple wants to adopt a cat. As they prepare their home and flat, turns out the feline can mess with time. They probably weren't prepared for that. 3 stars, Jaybird. They did it in a wee bit of a limerick.
It wasn't pervy enough. It wasn't pervy
that was
enough.
my problem with it, but I'd give this dirty limerick a 1 star as a dirty limerick.
Yes,
but definitely a 5-star in effort.
That's cute. I've got a 4-star by Luther. It's Luther, but an extra U, so I guess Luther.
Mm-hmm.
Got to hang on that U a little long. 4 stars and a heart, and this is what Luther has to say. There should be trigger warnings for painfully honest representations of falling out of love and the irresolution of letting go.
So true.
That works for me.
Punctuation on both of our reviews comes from Karamashi with 4 stars, who says, I don't take life serious enough to shit on Miranda July and her films. 4 stars. I'm going to like that. I like all of these. Well done. Thanks, Letterboxd. Andy, it's hard to believe we've been having weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
Oh, you're telling me. Producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a ton of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
The Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals has links to purchase the source material behind our adapted film discussions. Your purchases there help support the show at no extra cost.
For the entirety of season 11, we featured films directed by women.
The only exceptions were some of our member bonus episodes.
We talked about The Lure for our horror debuts series, which is a very loose adaptation of The Little Mermaid by Hans Christian Andersen.
Definitely miles from the Disney versions.
For our 10-year anniversary series, we covered We Need to Talk About Kevin, taken from the Lionel Shriver novel.
Man, that was brilliant.
And horrifying.
Yeah. The Journalist series included Merrily We Go to Hell and The Weight of Water, adapted from Anita Shreve's bestseller.
We filled some gaps in previous series with member bonus episodes on adaptations like Malcolm X, Mr. Blandings Builds His Dream House, Cactus Flower, Wild at Heart, Life Force, and The Blues Brothers.
Our John Hurd series looked at a trio of adaptations: Chilly Scenes of Winter from the novel by Ann Beatty, Awakenings based on Oliver Sacks' nonfiction book, and Rambling Rose adapted from the Calder Willingham novel.
2 films in our coming-of-age debuts series were adapted from books: The Virgin Suicides from Jeffrey Eugenides, and The Diary of a Teenage Girl, Phoebe Glockner's graphic novel.
We had Queen of Kotway for our sports series based on Tim Crothers' nonfiction book.
And Clueless kicked off our 90s comedy series, loosely adapted from Jane Austen's Emma.
It totally took place in the 90s, though. Find all of these books and more adaptations on our originals page at thenextreel.com/originals.
Start your next read from the movies we've covered. Visit thenextreel.com/originals today.